So speaking of partners and businesses and all of that good stuff, it is now time for our business partner panel discussion with three business partners of the Discoverability Network. So to begin with, I would like to introduce Franklina Tawaya, CHRP, a Human Resources Specialist with DSV Solutions Canada. Franklina is a certified human resources professional with over 7 years of industry experience. She holds an HR Management Postgrad Certificate from George Brown College and a master's in HR Management from York University, and is currently an HR specialist supporting DSV Solutions Canada's East region. In her free time, she spearheads community initiatives to inspire kids to continue to excel in their academic careers. Thank you for joining us, Franklina. The next guest I would like to introduce is Kathy Catrebe-Reyes, an advisor with the Equity and Inclusion Department at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, where she works to embed equity, inclusion, and accessibility cross-departmentally. As an Arab Canadian and someone who lives with an invisible health condition, Kathy is passionate about creating and delivering programs and strategies that amplify underrepresented voices. Among many high-impact projects that help foster equity, inclusion, and belonging at the CBC, Kathy leads the development and launch of CBC's first ever national paid placement program for people with disabilities that aims to kickstart the careers of disabled people, eliminate barriers to employment, showcase the participants' skills, and generate more discussion, learning, and content related to disability, accessibility, and inclusion. Kathy also co-developed and launched CBC's first ever on-air talent development program for people with disabilities, with a goal to increase on-air representation of disabled professionals who work in media. Prior to CBC, Kathy worked in a variety of roles within the cultural sector, including Ontario Creates, Toronto International Film Festival, and TV Ontario, and led professional development programs for emerging Canadian content creators. She also worked on several film and television productions for Canadian and US shows. Kathy, it is a pleasure to have you. Finally, last but certainly not least, it is my pleasure to introduce Fatima Finnegan, the Vice President, Workforce Initiatives and Industry Relations with the Ontario Restaurant, Hotel, and Motel Association since 1999. ORMA is the largest provincial hospitality association in Canada, representing 4,000 members and 11,000 food service and accommodation establishments in Ontario. An Ontario hospitality leader with over 30 years of industry experience and a proven track record with positive contributions to the hospitality industry, her extensive hospitality management background provided her with experience from Holiday Inns, Venture Inns, Crown Plaza, Travel Lodge Hotels, and Quality Inn properties. This experience led her to teach for a number of years at Humber College of Applied Arts and Technology. Fatima's areas of influence, knowledge, and experience are in accessibility and energy. Assisting hospitality operators in the province with regulatory compliance and strategic application to their operations is key. Other areas of experience include labor, environment, and tourism. Fatima is fluent in 3 languages, English, French, and Portuguese, and attempts to make Irish her 4th official language. Fatima resides in Simcoe County with her husband, Brian. They are proud parents of Kayleen, who is also making her way in the hospitality industry. Fatima, thank you for joining us today. I've read your bio a number of times, and I'm hoping that one day I will not be stating that Irish is a language you hope to make your 4th language. You'll just be lumping it in with the others. So having said that, we have our 3 business panelists here, and I'd like to begin with asking Franklina a question, specifically related to DSV's initiative to hire a significant number of job seekers with disabilities to staff multiple warehouses. This is something DSV has undertaken recently, and I'm wondering if you can share some details about it with us. Oh, Franklina, we can't hear you.
Is it much better?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Perfect. So thank you, Donald, for that introduction. I'm Franklina. I'm working at DSV as an HR specialist, and we recently, just about mid of last year, we embarked on a diversity and inclusion. Project. We newly launched it at our DSV Canada location. We currently have this ongoing initiative in the States, but then we introduced it in Canada, and we decided, you know what, we wanted to ensure that our recruitment processes, our recruitment in general is very diverse, and that we are hiring individuals with all abilities into the work team. So this really was our goal. So we started to partner with community organizations, third-party organizations, as to how to really achieve our goal. And hence, we've had a really good working relationship with Donald, from OCC, and things are going really well. We've actually hired so far over 16, just over 16 new hires with all various abilities. And it's a new initiative. We are actually very happy that we embarked on this. We're learning as the time goes on as a team, and we're very happy that our work environment is more inclusive.
Well, Franklina, clearly with 16 hires, as well as this initiative beginning in the United States, which I'm sure is even further along, you've obviously made good progress. And as a bit of foreshadowing, we'll have some questions about how you've implemented this a bit later. But next, I would like to turn to Fatima, and continuing with this theme, I am curious as to how ORMA is currently working with its members to recruit talent with a disability.
Thank you, Donald. We've continued to be an all-inclusive sector. It's in our name. We're all about accommodation, and we accommodate our external customers daily. And when our external customers come into our tourism and hospitality establishments, we honor their accommodations, and we have customers who ask for no salt, or they're on a special diet, or they're sleeping at our hotels and require a foam pillow versus a feathered pillow. We accommodate daily, no different to our internal customers. And when our employees work in our establishments, we accommodate them as well. And with that said, we continue to seek out workers from all cultures, all abilities to work in our sector. As long as they have good attitude, we will train, and we partner with folks like here with the Discoverability platform, which has proven to be a viable tool for our employers for posting their jobs, and engaging with employment service providers to help let them know that we have many open positions at front of the house, back of the house, and administration positions as well.
Sometimes when there seems to be a natural inference to make, it doesn't necessarily play out the way one would expect. But it is nice to know that with the accommodations industry, for all intents and purposes, that does translate into accommodations for both workers and clearly for patrons. You have a great deal of experience in that, so that makes sense. Finally, to conclude this opening theme of questions, Kathy, I know the CBC has integrated accessibility training and processes into many facets of its operation, and I'm wondering what precipitated such a comprehensive approach to inclusivity and accessibility.
Hi there. Yes, thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's a pleasure to be here. What precipitated it is that we had somebody mentioned it to us years ago. So Kai Black was the instigator. He is the co-founder of Abilicrew, which is our employee resource group for people with disabilities. And so around 6 years ago, he talked about kind of the gap in terms of employing people with disabilities at the CBC. He suggested launching a program to hire more people with disabilities, because at the time, I think Stats Canada had reported that the unemployment rate of persons with disabilities aged 25 to 64 was 11%, compared to 6% for people who did not have disabilities. And CBC staff with disabilities seemed to have been underserved at the CBC at the time. And we also wanted to better reflect CBC's audience. And so Kai wanted to address that gap, and he went to the equity and inclusion head at the time, and they were very open to it. And that's why we created a program called CAPE, which is a paid placement program, which I think you mentioned earlier, for people with disabilities. It's now a 6-month paid placement program, and it has a lot of career development components attached to it as well. So that's one way that we thought we would just have more people, joining internally, although also just making sure that we don't forget about the people who already work at the CBC with disabilities and who have become more kind of vocally open about it, which is awesome. It was a good byproduct of having the employee resource group.
Well, thank you for that wealth of information. I know from personal experience, actually, because my father did some peripheral work with the CBC, sort of as I don't know, consultant is the wrong word. I guess freelance would be the right word. He was a lighting director, as well as a friend's wife who works for the CBC, that being sort of progressive in terms of the training of staff, as well as the accommodations that are provided, tends to be embedded into CBC's culture. So appreciate the insight there. Franklina, as promised, I would like to know more about how DSV has adapted its recruitment and employment practices to successfully achieve its inclusive hiring goals. And I promise I'll start phrasing some of these questions like questions a little bit later, but I'm sure you follow my meaning.
Not a problem. Yeah, so with this new initiative, we definitely had to adjust the recruitment strategies, and obviously partnering with third-party organizations or community organizations. And we do know that some of our candidates do need accommodation. So that's something that we usually or typically would ask anyway, when we are bringing in any candidate at all for an interview. But then we did know that for sure accommodation would be needed. So what had happened is that some of the organizations we partnered with, they are able to, assist us with a job aid or a personnel that can come in and can better work with us and a candidate to really help to, remove any sort of barriers in communication, or just to kind of help facilitate the discussion or conversation. So we've been doing that, and that's new for us, but it's been working really well. Just having, job aides or social workers coming and just assist with communication since we're not as familiar as to, sometimes how to, relate to certain candidates that have a variety of disabilities. So we've been able to adjust to that, and that's really working well. The next thing that we did also with onboarding is that for instance, for orientation, we would usually have maybe about 10 new hires, and they all support themselves. They are handed paperwork But then for what we've done now, because we do know that there are, candidates that come in and they might just have, some level of intellectual disabilities there. So we can definitely, what I do is we would, work with them hand in hand to help them with completing their paperwork. We also do have additional HR staff in case, it's a lot of work for one person at a time, presenting and also helping with paperwork. We have an HR assistant to also aid with, making sure all paperwork is completed, with on the job training. So we have introduced a trainer on the floor. So we have a dedicated warehouse trainer for our team members that are coming in and may have some challenges in terms of maybe may need more time with training, or just may need further assistance. So we've dedicated a specific trainer to help alleviate those barriers.
So that's a number of different tools and approaches that you're taking. I think working with employment service organizations to leverage their expertise, as well as job coaches to enhance and augment training and orientation in the workplace, is obviously a great route to go. Having identified specific people on the floor to also work on these areas from your staff team is going to embed that kind of knowledge and expertise within your organization. So I think it's pretty clear why you're seeing the success that you are. Fatima, sort of in a similar vein, now looking at how these kind of practices can be extrapolated to other businesses, considering the success the hospitality industry has had when it comes to hiring and retaining talent with disabilities, how can other businesses look to emulate the success of the hospitality industry in this regard?
It's been very important to our sector to be all inclusive, and we've always been all inclusive to hire all cultures, diversities, and be inclusive in that fashion. And we are all about adaptability. And we needed to bring accommodations and those adaptabilities in front of employers. We know that there are still fears out there in hiring persons with disabilities. So what we needed to do is we needed to bring persons with disabilities in front of employers so that employers would understand the abilities and not the disabilities, because that would follow. I'll give you an example. We are all about cooking and culinary and food experience. We all love a good plate of food, a fine glass of wine, and a good dish of sugared dessert. So we need to engage persons with disabilities in the same way. The example I share with you was we ran some cooking classes. We hired some professional chefs. We filled a classroom with all persons with disabilities to experience and learn how to cook. We know that most persons with disabilities require tools and devices to be successful in the kitchen. So we had a mobile kitchen, a classroom filled of varying disabilities, and we wanted to introduce fresh foods, fresh vegetables, so that no person with a disability would be intimidated to go into a grocery store to buy fresh foods, and not just frozen foods into the microwave and onto a dinner plate. We ran 24 cooking classes for these varying persons with disabilities, showed them, for instance, in one classroom, we brought 8 different types of mushrooms. We passed them around. People got to feel them, touch them, smell them. And we introduced ways of how to cut them, cook them, prepare. And we prepared a cookbook, which was then shared with the different groups of persons with disabilities and their communities. And that was a way that we used to promote hospitality to persons with disabilities, that they can have a career and a job opportunity with us. That form of engagement was so exciting that we then brought employers to the graduation of these individuals that finished their cooking classes. And we had a great networking event where the employers were able to connect with the graduating cooks from our classes. And it was a real fine way to introduce what we all take for granted as going out for dinner, but that we can convert it into a career. And we look for those ways to help employers understand that hiring persons with disabilities is a wonderful tap into employment for them to work into our sector. So that's just a small example of turning things around, of not just hiring, but turning it into an experience for them.
So that's actually a very interesting approach, not just getting job seekers in front of the employers, but building something of a rapport and facilitating that level of engagement that leads to dialogue, and then eventually these kinds of interactions that you're describing, which will perhaps result in a more open conversation and ability for people to apply, as well as for employers to recruit. I think there are a number of collaborations and partnerships that can certainly be sought out in order to achieve this across sectors. So very, very good example, thoughtful example. Thank you. Kathy, I'm going to turn back to you for the next couple of questions. The first one is, and this is a bit different from the two that I asked Franklina and Fatima, but how is CBC embedding inclusive design thinking and accessibility into staff training and culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's really about just supporting and providing opportunities for all staff and all new staff. Just, opportunities that everyone would benefit from. So it's kind of using that platinum rule as opposed to the golden rule. So it's treating others as they would like to be treated and not how you want to be treated. So for instance, one of my colleagues created an onboarding checklist using Trello. She shares it with other colleagues, and she asks that new hires, how do you prefer to communicate? So is it by email, by phone, chat, text? And so I feel like that we can all benefit from that question. And through the PA program too, we have a few components embedded as well. So we encourage hiring managers to have conversations early in the onboarding process. We ask that simple question that I learned from Lisa Kelly. What do you need in order to do your best work? And you just ask everybody that question as well. And so with CAPE too, we offer components that are kind of embedded within the program. So career development. We have a mentorship program. We match people with peer coaches, so like people that they can just talk to on a day-to-day basis. Like a colleague who they can check in with daily. We make sure that employees have a variety of supports in place. So we make sure that the hiring managers are also trained, and they get training on ableism and accessibility. We hire an occupational therapist who is available for the hiring managers and for CAPE participants as well. So yeah, a variety of different components there. Another thing that we do, I know other departments do, is empathy training to understand all different user needs. And then all tools that they use must be inclusive. They have, a variety of different ways to make sure that inclusion is thought of and embedded in everyday work.
So very thorough training in terms of topics that are covered. I also like the idea of peer coaches and mentors. I've heard of other workplaces taking that route, and not just with disability, but with a number of approaches to maximizing productivity. And obviously learning from somebody who has the experience is a great way to do this. I also am I've never heard of the platinum rule. That's the first time I've heard that that phrase before. I do like it. I've heard the alternative phrasing to the golden rule, which is Confucius's silver rule about not treating people in a way that you would not want to be treated yourself. But the platinum rule is certainly a welcome addition, I think, to that now triumvirate, if you will, of moral or ethical rules to follow in terms of conduct. I do have another question for you, Kathy, and this one is more for the benefit of the businesses that are here today. But what advice would you give to businesses that want to successfully hire and retain job seekers with disabilities, but aren't sure where to begin?
Yeah, sure. I think it's just, you take it step by step. So just reaching out to disabled communities and stakeholders, kind of checking in and connecting and maybe asking for feedback if they're willing to share that. You can also start an ERG, an employee resource group for people with disabilities and their allies, and tap into that knowledge and expertise. I would also ensure that recruitment practices are inclusive, starting from job postings and interviews. Ensuring that the workplace is welcoming, because there's nothing worse than inviting people into your workspace and then having them find out that it's not as inclusive and welcoming. So for example, inaccessible platforms, which is kind of what we went through, and buildings that may not be accessible as well. I would also just say to be mindful of disclosure, and it's still disclosing disability is still an issue, and there's a fear of discrimination and stigma, and just concern about feeding into incorrect stereotypes. Also, I would just say that the onus for requesting accommodations should not be on the new hire. It should be, it should, as I mentioned, start with the hiring manager. So, just start that question of what it is that you need to do your best work, and that will kind of hopefully lead into that conversation. And just also, as we hear, it's not a tick the box exercise. You really just, you need to be committed to including as many voices and talents as possible. And my big takeaway as well is just learning more about and taking into account how our intersecting identities inform our lived experiences. So it's what Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw identified years ago, with the whole intersectional kind of identity, overlapping identities.
I like a lot of what you said, but I really like what you said about accommodations and the hiring manager, the onus being on them, and specifically asking about it and what people need to be most productive or perform to their highest standard. I think that would produce excellent results. And again, not just relating to hiring people with disabilities, but of course for everybody, because not everybody does everything the same way, or at least not everybody is most effective doing things the same way. And as we've mentioned previously, most accommodations are not even provided for matters related to disability. So that is great advice and speaks more towards universal design in general, best practices for businesses. Franklina, I have one more question for you, and it relates to accommodations. So this is a nice transition. Specifically, what accommodations have been made in the workplace at DSV in order to achieve an accessible working environment? So I'm talking about things like scheduling, physical spaces, and completion of tasks, for instance.
Yeah, so Donald, we've made a couple of changes, and that we're going to continue to make changes to make, all candidates as comfortable as possible to work in DSV. So part of what we've done now is, we're very flexible, more flexible with our work schedules. So initially we just had, full-time workers working Monday to Friday or Sunday to Thursday. Or we would have part-time contract team members that would work pretty much up to 20 hours. So we were very rigid in terms of our hours because, we are a logistics company, so pretty much every hour is being calculated, and we kind of had our numbers rigid that way. But then when we explored, we started this program, we said, hey guys, you know what, we want to be more flexible because not everybody's going to be able to work the number of hours that, we have in place for, all employees, and not everybody would be able to work on specific days that we specific time frame, sorry. So what we did then is that we've made our working times a bit flexible. So, if candidates come in and we start in at 7 a.m. and probably that's too early for some candidates, given, the type of accommodation that, they require, then, we say, hey, you know what, you can start an hour later. So you can do an 8 to 4 instead of a 7 to 3. We have also adjusted, the working hours. So we typically would go with 8 hours. So what we're doing now is that for some candidates that are not able to stand, in the work shift for 8 hours, because this is a role where you're standing, you're walking around the entire shift. And I do understand it can get tiring for some candidates that do have maybe they do have some problems with your legs, they're not able to, or or maybe with your back as well, they have a condition. So with that being said, we'll just probably go with a 5-hour work shift, break it down in such a way that we make it more inclusive for all our new hires, employees. The other thing we did too is that we started to do a lot more training, because we realized that we needed an AODA refresher training. That's AODA, just doing a refresher training for our management team members. So we recently did that, just about a couple of months ago, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. We understand what accommodation is. So just, gearing up for when we have to hire more team members in with disabilities. We wanted to make sure the transition, or, just this program is as successful as possible. One thing that happened at the beginning is we experienced a few challenges because we had new management that maybe had never worked with individuals with various disabilities. So then we noticed that training is of the essence. So then we boosted up on our training, did an AODA, HR literally sitting with each hiring manager, doing coaching lessons. Okay, so when situations do arise, what to do, if you have to have a conversation with team members in such a way that the communication is effective, maybe this is how to go about it. So we've been doing a lot of coaching since the initiation of this program. And we want it to be successful, and we want it to be for the long term, which it is going to be. So we're doing a lot of the initial work just to get the program running more smoothly. And yeah, that's just to name a few, but then there are a lot more changes that are, going to be coming up soon, because our goal is we want to hire at least, we want to increase our hires. I don't know the specific number, I'll get that for you, but then I know that we want to at least hire at least 20 more team members into different departments. And one highlight for concerning this conversation, I would say, would be the cross training function. We are actually cross training a lot of our team members that have, various abilities. We are cross training them into different job functions. So that's the box making function. We're doing the pallet loading as well. We have opportunities there as well. So we have a trainer that's training for pallet loading. And I believe some candidates also have been interested in a forklift as well, driving a forklift. So we're actually working with team members to see how best we can get them to get them licensed and also driving a forklift. And we are also cross-training individuals, our candidates or our new hires, also in our picking and packing area and induction area as well. So a lot of what we do here in this warehouse, DSV warehouse, is we do a lot of picking and packing of really small cosmetics or beauty products. So, and most of it will require using an RF scanner. So we are also teaching some of our new hires how to use an RF scanner for those people that are able to effectively use that with no issues. So we're definitely doing a lot more cross training this season. That's our goal.
That is very thorough. I actually, one of the things I find most interesting when you're talking about accommodations is the training that is being provided to other staff in the warehouse around working with, working in the same warehouse as the other job seekers with disabilities that you're hiring. That is an interesting approach to looking at accommodations, but certainly makes good sense. We are running up towards the end of our time for this panel, but we do have a little bit of a buffer at the end, so I can push things just a little bit. So Fatima, in 2 minutes or less. Can you just tell us why ORMA has such high buy-in from member businesses when it offers to support them in connecting with the disability talent pipeline? I think that would be really useful information for the businesses in attendance here today.
Donald, I can do it in less than 1 minute. We needed hospitality workers before COVID. COVID has just amplified the need for workers in our sector. And I just want to close in that inclusive workplace is more about culture than anything else. And we need to incorporate training in our onboarding and our orientation. Many of our employers use the buddy system. So many inclusive employers showcase who they are in their company objectives, their mission, their beliefs, because there's an element of dignity, respect, and quality for both our internal customers and our external customers. So I will close it with those comments, Donald.
Well, thank you, Fatima. I appreciate those insightful words and your remarkable ability to remain concise. It is an ability I do not possess. Thank you to all three of you, Franklina, Kathy, Fatima. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today to share your experiences creating inclusive businesses and disability confident organizations, as well as the ways you've managed to be successful in hiring and retaining talent with a disability. And as a bit of foreshadowing again, for those who are interested in other tools and approaches to do this successfully, stay tuned. Our final panel will have some great information for you.